Well, if you didn't know, Anti-Poverty Week starts Sunday the 12th of October through Saturday the 18th of October this year. So if you're listening to this when it drops, we are in Anti-Poverty Week. It's the 23rd year that it's been held in Australia. Now, you might be wondering, well, what does poverty mean? Poverty means lacking the resources needed for basic standards like food, shelter, clothing, healthcare, and education. It's also about missing opportunities and freedoms to live with dignity and choice. And to be honest, guys, if you are listening to this, you probably, there's a very, 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 very high chance you do not form part of the definition of poverty. But it's really important that we understand what that definition is. And you may be able to, if you see someone in need, you can help and all that stuff. ACOS/University of New South Wales 2022 data says that 3.3 million Australians, around 13.5%, live below the poverty line. And this includes a whopping 761,000 children, or 16.5% of children. The poverty line is basically 50% of median income. The focus this year for Anti-Poverty Week is reducing stigma and encouraging people to seek support. WA financial counselling data says over the last 12 months, only 16% of people seek help immediately. 36% experience hardship for over a year before contacting a service. Financial counselling and financial coaching are active tools to address poverty in Australia. So, my friends, today you are in good hands because I've got Paul Jordan. He's a financial counsellor with UnitingWA. It's a wonderful charity, friends of the podcast. Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Glen. Good to be here.
Now, we have a heap of questions that we're going to get into just to really understand what it is that you do as a financial counsellor, what you don't do, how can we bring awareness to poverty, all the things. Now, Paul, I haven't lost anyone yet, but are you ready to go?
Yes, I'm fine to go.
All right. Well, my name is Glen James. It's Anti-Poverty Week. Let's have a chat. Financial counselling versus financial advice. Before we get into it, this show is general advice only, and I've got a license to provide that advice. Full details can be found in the show notes. I'm a former financial advisor. Now I do the Money, Money, Money podcast. If you're a regular here, we call it M3, and we do a podcast called Retire Right. I've got a book, The Quick Start Guide to Investing, is available wherever good books are sold. There's a link in the show notes if you want to turn up your investing to 11, or if you're just getting started. Let's get into it. Thank you so much for being here today. Paul, at the outset, and this is not one of the questions that I sent you prior, is there anything you wanted to say at the top of this episode, given that it is Anti-Poverty Week, or anything about UnitingWA as a charity? I don't know if you want to say hi to someone that you know. I don't care. I just thought I'd throw to you first with an open floor.
Look, I probably with your comments around the poverty numbers, and also your precursor where you said a lot of your audience probably don't need financial counselling services for the most part, and I would agree with that. But what we're finding over the last couple of years, especially since COVID, is the rise in the number of people that would normally be deemed affluent, would never have even considered financial counselling services in the past, but for whatever circumstances, something has changed in their financial circumstances, their personal circumstances, that's led them to the point where they need to speak to a financial counsellor because they're just completely unsure of what their next steps might be. So yes, poverty is a big issue, and it's something we really, really focus on right across the country through Financial Counselling Australia, through the state organisations for financial counsellors as well. But that's not to exclude members of your audience that might need these services, or family members that need these services as well.
And just briefly tell us a little bit about UnitingWA and the work that's happening over there. Because hello to everyone who's from Western Australia who listens to the show as well.
Yeah. Welcome team. Welcome all the WA residents that are listening in. Look, UnitingWA it's a not-for-profit service. We're focused heavily in the Perth CBD area. We've also got a big presence down in the Great Southern area around Albany. Our services are extensive. We've providing NDIS services. We've got our financial counselling services, homelessness services. We've got reintegration programs. There's a lot that Uniting WA does, and of course there's uniting bodies in different states right across the country as well. It's not limited to just Uniting WA. But it is a not-for-profit service, and we're really, really focused on helping those people at the lower end of the spectrum that are just finding it tough for whatever reason. It could be family, it could be money, it could be homelessness, poverty, and we're just saying, okay, what can we do? And where necessary, we also, our management team also does quite a bit of lobbying with government sectors that can help these people and step in and provide better support and services.
And, we're only one event or one thing away from our situation changing, because life can be good until it isn't, and people might end up in a situation where they didn't plan for and end up needing some services from a good charity like Uniting WA. All right, let's get to this bread and butter that I wanted to chat about today. So how do you describe financial counselling to someone who's never heard of it?
Very importantly, the first thing I'll say right up front, it's a free service.
Right.
And it's designed to help people manage their living expenses, their debts, where it's appropriate, avoid potential legal action. And really what we're aiming to do is get them back on track, especially when they're unsure what to do. Now, our services, we can provide information around related services. So it might be a case of, look, this is really a legal matter. Go and speak to these community legal services, for example. We can give those contact details and say these are the most appropriate legal community services. It might be accounting services. We also provide information around concessions and grants that are available for people, especially around utilities. A lot of people are aware of different concessions that are available to them, but what they're not aware of is all the different types of grants that are available to them, so that if they're unable to meet their electricity bill, their gas bill, there is usually some sort of additional assistance available. So we know about those grants and we can guide those people to those different grants and how to apply. And if appropriate, we can even step in and submit the applications on their behalf. We're well trained in consumer credit law. We're well trained in bankruptcy law. And this can be a real minefield for many of our clients, and they're just unsure what to do. Do they have any rights? What are their obligations? So we can certainly guide them around consumer credit law. We can guide them around the bankruptcy law. We can tell them about the consequences of bankruptcy. And there's a lot of misconceptions around bankruptcy as well. So we can guide them, what is right and what is wrong around bankruptcy. Now, pointing out that we try to avoid bankruptcy as well. We tend to consider it more of a last resort. So it's certainly not our go-to strategy. We're also well trained in credit reporting and what's required for creditors to make credit reports, make default reports on credit reporting, how to get the credit reports repaired. So we can talk to people about that, and can they get it fixed? If so, how do they go about that? If there's a notation on their credit report and it's in error, we can guide them as how to get that rectified. Financial abuse is a big one, unfortunately. We can talk to our clients and say, okay, well, yes, this is a clear case of financial abuse. How do we resolve that? And we can often work with creditors either advocating for our clients, or we can guide them so they can self-advocate for their creditors to get things back on track. We're also really good at complaint resolution, particularly from a credit perspective. We've got really, really good relationships with the major banks and lots of creditors right across the country. We know what those creditors are looking for, or those service providers are looking for generally, and we can typically come up with some sort of complaint resolution on behalf of our clients. And if we can't do that, then we know about the different sorts of ombudsman services that are out there. We can tell our clients, okay, these are services that are available to you. They can provide mediation and come to some sort of middle ground, if that's appropriate for our clients, or if our client hasn't done anything wrong whatsoever and it's actually the service provider or the creditor that's stepped out of line, then we can get a decision in our client's favour as well. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other things in the financial.
Yeah, I was going to say,
counselling
do you repair kitchen sinks at all? You've bloody done everything else. Hey, question. You said that it's a free service, so there's no cost to the consumer. Okay, a couple of things there. Is that a blanket? Is there some Hippocratic oath if you're a financial counsellor in Australia, you do not charge? Could I become one tomorrow and as part of that, I do not charge people, or is it just UnitingWA that is a free service?
So many of your listeners will be aware that as a financial advisor, for example, or any sort of credit provider, you need a license, a financial services license through ASIC. Financial counselling services have an exemption. We don't need that financial services license to operate, but there are a number of conditions to that exemption. And the big one, to answer your question, is we cannot charge a fee. It's as simple as that.
So, okay, that's cool. So that's the first kind of question. And then would you say first, and this is where, because I don't know, it's probably a really bad thing, but in my 8 years of podcasting, I've actually never had a financial counsellor on the podcast and talk to them, because it's just most of our audience do not have that need. We see it, but because it is Anti-Poverty Week, and I really did want to actually have this conversation, and I'm glad that you guys reached out. But are you, with the training, I guess I'm saying, like, do you go through counselling school and learn general counselling concepts like, oh, this is what happens if a spouse and their partner and a husband and wife are fighting, bread and butter counselling stuff, and this is trauma counselling and all this stuff, and then you specialise in financial counselling? Or is it all just money stuff and then you tack on the soft counselling skills?
So to become a financial counsellor, we do need to actually complete a financial counselling diploma. As far as the background leading up to that, it could be, many of my colleagues come from a social services support background. There's a lot of us that have a financial background. I'm a former banker, insurance expert. I've been in the insurance and finance industry since the early 80s.
Right.
So there's that sort of background, but just because I have a financial background doesn't make me any better than another financial counsellor who comes from a social support services background, because they've got a completely different skill set altogether. We're really good, because there's no fees involved, we're really good in collaborating with each other, and there's all different sorts of agencies out there. You know, we've been talking about UnitingWA, but of course there's all sorts of agencies that provide financial counselling services, and we're not in competition with each other. So we're regularly sharing resources, information with each other, so that we can get the best outcomes for our clients.
So what's the actual difference between a financial counsellor and a financial advisor?
So as I said, up front, it's free. That's a big one. It's independent. We're not tied to an organisation. We're not tied to a superannuation fund, a bank, an insurance company. People often will ask us, well, who's the best superannuation provider that I need to go to? Who's the best home loan provider? We don't give that sort of advice, because we're fiercely independent, because we want to make sure there's never any influence on the information that we provide to our clients. That's a big one as well. Again, if I haven't mentioned already, it's free. A big one is that...
Oh, actually, quick question. How much is it to see a financial counsellor?
I think I should have mentioned that before. It's free.
Yeah, you did mention that, actually, yeah.
A big thing that needs to be remembered by any financial counselling client is that, and this is a big distinction between financial counselling and financial advice, is that we're not able to provide personal financial advice. And by that, I mean, we'll still look at our clients' circumstances, what's brought them to a financial counsellor, what is it they're trying to achieve. That's always a big one and should be a part of any financial counselling discussion. Where does our client want to end up at? But instead of us as financial counselling saying, okay, well, based on what it is you're trying to achieve, based on your circumstances, you need to do X, Y, and Z. We'll actually talk them through their options, describe that. If it's not self-evident, we'll talk them through the advantages and the disadvantages of those options. We'll encourage them to ask questions around it so they've got a good understanding, because ultimately they need to make those decisions themselves. But we'll hold their hand through that process so that they can reasonably comfortably at the back end of it make decisions that are appropriate for themselves. The other things we can't do is we can't give investment advice, we can't give superannuation or insurance advice, and we can give factual advice around those products and those services, but we can't say, look, these are the most appropriate product services for you. In that case, then one of our roles would be, hey, if you want personal information around that, we recommend you go and speak to a financial advisor. The big thing is for us, and where financial advisors don't typically, an area that they don't typically play in, is around debt management. That's our bread and butter, and just our clients' guidance on managing their day-to-day living expenses.
Okay, question. I'll say it this way: there could be a family or an individual. We'll just call it a family, and the household income is 250 or 300 grand. Okay, and they are financially stressed. They're living week on week, blah blah blah. So there could be another family where the household income could be literally just welfare benefits. Call it 30 grand a year. Both present the same problems. Living week on week, don't feel like they're getting ahead, can't, blah, blah, blah. Both of them have completely separate situations. Is there an income cutoff? Like, it's free to see a financial counsellor, but is there a thing where it's like, well, if you actually earn over 80 grand a year or above that median income or the poverty line, don't come and see us?
With some agencies, with some financial counselling agencies, they do have income thresholds where if you're above that threshold, they won't provide a financial counselling services. In some agencies, they might have a geographical restriction. So if you're not within this council area or this electorate,
postcode or whatever,
this postcode, then unfortunately they can't provide the services. And that all comes down to funding restrictions, all that sort of stuff. But there's a lot out there that don't have income thresholds, that don't have geographical restrictions. For example, us at UnitingWA, our only geographical restriction is that you need to be a resident of WA. We don't have income thresholds. And just because somebody might be earning $250,000 a year as if their household income, as you mentioned, they still might have financial stress because they're unsure of how to manage their money. There might be a change in their circumstances where, they might have been on $350,000 a week before. Something's happened, big income reduction, and of course they've got debt that was associated with that larger income, and they're not quite sure what the next steps might be. They might know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but in the meantime, their creditors are pressing them to address their arrears or sell their assets or whatever the case might be, and we can step in and say, look, those solutions, they're a possible outcome, but have you considered A, B, and C? And we can guide them in that respect as well. Yeah. So there's no reason why we can't talk to the people on the higher incomes if they're in financial stress and are unsure what to do. And similarly, we talk on a regular basis to people on the lower end of the spectrum that are just having trouble just in this cost of living crisis, trying to make ends meet.
So your last three clients that you've had this week, tell us some type of financial challenges that you've helped them through.
Yeah, common ones that we see, it might be just something really, really simple. They're restricted to their Centrelink income and they're just having difficulty paying their power bill, their gas bill, their phone bill. And these days, it's largely because of a surge in the rental costs. So we're seeing that on a very regular basis. Very often, in fact, did have one this week. They've lost their job due to illness, and it's going to be some months before they're able to get back on track and get back into the workforce. There's also regular ones where we see a relationship breakdown where clients are now actually trying to survive on a single income. There's also a small number of financial counsellors that have accreditation to work with small business clients as well. And what we're seeing with our small business clients on a very regular basis is just assistance in managing their ATO debt. There's a lot of small businesses coming out of the COVID crisis carrying ATO debt, and they're unsure what to do. The ATO are really pressing them for payment of those debts, and we can work with the ATO in association with our clients and say, okay, well, let's come to a suitable arrangement so that the debt can be arranged and they can hopefully continue on with their small business.
And why do you think people wait maybe a year or more before reaching out?
Yeah, and this is a big one. A lot of people do wait, and I'd say there's a few reasons for that. Probably one of the biggest ones is quite simply a lack of awareness. I mentioned earlier that I've been in the insurance and banking industry since the early 80s. And honestly, I didn't know I was about financial counselling probably until about 10 years ago. A lot of bankers don't know. You talk to your branch banking staff, they don't know about financial counsellors. So when you've got people that are prominent in the finance industry, such as just your local banker, and don't know about financial counselling, how is it that the general public can possibly know about it as well? And unfortunately, we just don't have the funding available to us to go and advertise our services. So that's a big one, just a lack of awareness. Another big one is shame. When people are unable to manage their money, there is a big sense of shame, and that's a really hard one to overcome. There's also the common Aussie approach is like, oh, she'll be right, mate, or the stick their head in the sand approach. Men especially, guys, you need to stop it. There's nothing wrong about asking for help.
Yeah. And maybe stop gambling.
Sorry, mate?
And maybe stop gambling.
Yes, yeah, that's a big one, especially with the rise of gambling apps. It's well hidden.
Disgusting.
Yes, and it's really, really, I can get a lot of my clients to open up about a lot of their circumstances, but there is still a real stigma about gambling and voicing that to people.
Yeah, and I know I said it flippantly, like stop gambling, like it can be, addiction is an illness, and that can manifest in different ways. Hey, we're going to take a break, and when we get back, I'm going to ask you another spicy batch of questions. We'll be back right after this.
If you're after personal financial advice, don't get it from a podcast. But if you want guidance tailored to your situation, head to moneypodcast.com.au and click Get Help. We'll connect you with one of our trusted professionals, financial advisors and mortgage brokers, who work with people right across Australia. No matter where you are, they can help. Now, before we get back to the show, a quick reminder to protect your financial life. That means having income protection sorted. It means having death cover if there's any debt or dependents relying on you. It means getting your personal insurance in order. Most people insure their car, they insure their house, but what about themselves? Sky Wealth, who support this podcast, are specialist financial advisors who can help you get the right cover in place. Their advice is often more comprehensive and better value than going direct through your super. Book a complimentary 15-minute chat at sky.com.au. That's skye.com.au. And they'll point you in the right direction.
Rightio, we're back. Paul, can you share maybe a small success story of someone who's walked into your office or your Zoom meeting and you've worked with them? Maybe do a bit of what they came to you presenting with, what was triaged, how long you work with them, and then how long you basically, until you said, all right, you're all good, come back if you need anything in the future.
A really feel-good one that I had, a client that came in to see me earlier this year. It was a woman, single woman. She had been separated probably for about 12 months from a former partner. And unfortunately, she had been, as part of the relationship, there was financial abuse by the former partner against my client. While they were together, a bank had actually given her and a former partner a home loan in joint names, despite the fact that the home title was in his name only. So once they separated, she had no access and no benefit to that property whatsoever but she was still equally liable for the home loan repayments. And of course, if he missed repayments, then that would be reflected on her credit report. She'd be contacted by the bank and say, well, your home loan's in arrears, you need to address this, despite the fact that zero revenue from it, no access to it. The bank still wanted her to front up those payments. So she came and spoke to me and said, what do I do? I just don't know how to get around this. She'd spoken to the bank and they said, well, you need to repay it. So we investigated it, had a look at the home loan application, and we said, we just don't feel this is right. So we, on her behalf, with her permission, we actually approached the bank and said, look, here's her circumstances. We don't feel this is right. Can you release her from the bank? But unfortunately, the bank refused. So knowing complaint processes as financial counsellors, the next step for us was take that to the bank's internal dispute resolution team, otherwise known as their complaint team. We said, and again, we reiterated her story to them and said, you need to release it from this debt. It's just not fair. But they still refused. So what we did then on her behalf, we actually took the matter to the Australian Financial Complaints Authority, AFCA. We advocated on her behalf and said, this is financial abuse under the Banking Code of Practice. And also with the actual application process itself, there was a lot of things that weren't done through the bank and through the home loan broker that should have been done. We identified those errors, we presented that to AFCA, and we won the case. So we were able to get her released from that home loan entirely, 100%. And not only that, we were able to actually get her credit report repaired as well. So now she's moved on from that. She's living her own life, and she's been able to go out and get a car loan now because the credit report's been prepared. And she can do that. She can manage that successfully and easily on a current level of income.
Mm. And how long was that process, and how long did you work with her?
It was a good 6 to 8 months because we did go through a process. We approached the bank, we approached their IDR team. Then it went through to AFCA, and of course that can be a lengthy process these days while they got a bit of a backlog. And then there was also a little bit of follow-up activity, probably about a few months after the case was closed, simply because the bank had actually promised to remove the notations from her credit report. So we checked that 3 months down the track and found out they hadn't. So we went back to them 3 months later and said, guys, you promised you were going to do this. You didn't do it. Can you rectify it? They were good. They acknowledged their error and they quickly rectified it. So all up, it was a little over 12 months.
And actually, I'll go to this question. If someone presented to you and they're in financial mess, they might have a job, 70, 80 grand a year, rent, living week on week, but they've got debts from another life. They've got a couple of credit cards. They've got one that was gone into collections. Will you work with them and put a map together? It's like, all right, I want you to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G in that order. Do that at a time. Come back in a month and we can keep working through it. Or in some instances, and I know it's the case, you would sign an authority over so you can call the debt collectors and say, hey, bro, calling on behalf of Peter or Mary, how about you shove this debt up your ass? And then that's not an official UnitingWA thing. How about you shove it up your ass? Here's you chasing $2,000 that's 10 years old. How about you take $300, get stuffed, stop calling? Like, how much in the weeds of help land do you get with people?
It really depends on the client's situation and their own capabilities as well. We're really, not just UnitingWA, but financial counsellors right across the country, we're really big on taking a strength-based approach and working with our clients. So we'll, as much as we possibly can, we'll give them the tools and the skills so they can actually go and take these actions themselves. Or first of all, identify the actions themselves, take those actions, self-advocate with their creditors or their service providers so they can come out with a decent solution. If they're a little bit unsure about that, but they're willing to give that a crack, we'll just sit in the background. And, quite often I'll have a client sitting in my office. They'll be on the phone with the creditor. They'll be doing all the talking. But if the creditor becomes a little bit obnoxious, rude, they start asking questions that there's a lot of jargon, the client's just unsure, we'll just quite simply put them on hold. My client and I will have a chat saying, okay, well, this is what they're after, this is what they're saying. I'll put that in layperson's language, make sure the client's comfortable with their approach, and then they can go back on the phone and run with it from there. Where it's a really complex situation, that does happen on quite a regular basis, or if the client's just really, you can just tell they're really uncertain about their capabilities and what they're entitled to, what they can ask for, then we'll definitely step in those cases and advocate on behalf of our clients. You mentioned earlier that we'll lay out, okay, you need to do A, B, C, and D. Again, taking that strengths-based approach, we'll try to get our clients to actually determine that for themselves. We'll guide them along the way. Quite often we'll say, hey, look, based on our experience, this, you can expect this to happen or this to happen or this won't occur. Your expectations might be too high in this scenario. So we'll coach them, we'll guide them, and then we'll set them on a path. And yes, it's quite often, and in fact, many clients will ask for it. Say, okay, well, let's draw up an agreed action plan together. And they'll actually ask us, like, I need someone to hold me to account. So we'll catch up with them in a month's time. We'll set up an action plan. We'll catch up in a month's time. And we'll review that action plan and say, okay, you said you were going to do this. I was going to do this. Was it done? Yes, no. If not, why not? If it was, what was the outcome? So it's a strong collaborative approach between us and our clients. And yes, we encourage them to take the action themselves. It just gives them a lot more confidence so that if a similar situation arises in the future, they don't need me anymore. They know exactly what to do and they can go and do that themselves. That's a great outcome for them and for us as a financial counselling service. But where it does become more complex or creditors are being rude or obnoxious, then we step in and say, no, this isn't right. You need to do something different. And while we tend to not make threats around going to the ombudsman, but they know that if they're not doing the right thing, they know that we know as financial counsellors, if they're not stepping up to the plate and doing what they're supposed to do, we're actually going to take them to the ombudsman. That's going to cost them time, money, and possibly some reputational damage as well.
Yeah, and a lot of those creditors, like, they've purchased the debt, it's old debt, you're just sometimes dealing with the scum of the earth. Just on this credit stuff, I'm a big believer that live your life, pay your bills on time, keep out of debt, and the credit score will take care of itself and won't really impact your life. Is it fair to say all these programs that advertise credit repair, if you've done the debt yourself and there's no actual errors on there, there's nothing to repair because that's fact. It's more the repair if there's stuff on there that's fraudulent, in error, or like you talked about before, the bank or the vendor hasn't removed that because only the organisation has the authority to notify like Equifax, Ilion or Experian or whatever to say, hey, remove this entry. Is that yes or no, or is there something I'm missing?
No, you're absolutely correct. Through legislation, through credit report law, the only way you can remove a notation is the only way a creditor is obliged to remove a notation is if it's in error. Otherwise, they don't need to.
Or fraudulent, obviously.
You're fraudulent, yes, yeah. In my case with my client that I discussed earlier, that was a case of financial abuse. So, whilst it may not have been an error as such, they realised that it was unfair. If you went right back to proximate cause, that they probably shouldn't have given a loan in the first place. Yes, you could say it was an error. We got that one across the line. But generally, if it's just a case of, well, no, I don't like my credit report the way it is, and I'm trying to fix things, you're not going to get that across the line. Generally, I know there are credit reporting repair services out there that are available that advertise these services, and they can literally cost thousands of dollars. I did have one client last year that came back to me and off his own bat had actually approached one of these services, did get an outcome, and honestly, knowing his circumstances, I don't know how they did that legally. So that was a really big concern for me.
Given it's a free service and most charities and organisations want to help as many people as possible, is there an unwritten law potentially with some charities is like, look, it's free, but you're not coming once a week for a year? Like, is there generally, we like to get people in and out within 4 to 5, or we're just pragmatic and go, this is a really hard, intense case, we will stick with you as long as we need to?
Oh no, we'll stick with them as long as they need to, so long as we're making progress. Unfortunately, there are, and it's, if you're working with a financial counsellor, more often than not, we can encourage you to get the confidence and take the steps. And they might be small steps, but so long as we're making progress, so long as the client's actively involved in resolving the situation, we'll continue to work with them. It might be slow, and we've got no problem with that. But so long as they show a willingness to improve their situation, we'll keep that case open as long as it's necessary, and we'll continue to work with them, if necessary, their creditors as well. I don't know of any financial counselling service in Australia where we'll turn away somebody because you came and saw us last week. If you've still got a situation, you've still got a situation, and we're there to help.
Yeah, sweet. If somebody had debt, so from my experience, just coaching, the garden variety person out there, and they're in a pickle, it's been either an income problem, an expense problem, and or a debt problem. And usually two of those things, the debt and the expense problem, is generally due to a behavioural thing. We've lived on more than what we've earned for a long time, and the balance ends up on debt, and we've purchased too much and all that. The income thing, it's, sometimes that's our job and we can't get a pay rise because we're this award or we're on Centrelink benefits and some safety nets. How do you tackle bringing someone along this journey? Because the behaviour's got them into a mess sometimes. We want to get them out of the mess and stay out of the mess. So there needs to be a behavioural change. How do you help people get out of debt, stay out of debt, and then go forth and prosper?
A part of our role as financial counsellors is to coach people through those situations. And that's much more of an attitudinal problem. Okay, what's your attitude towards money? What was your understanding of money as you grew up? What did your family bring to you as far as an understanding of money? And often that there's a lack of understanding around managing money, and not just through the schooling systems, but also in the family as well. Because obviously if your parents had never been taught how to manage money effectively, how the heck are they going to teach you? So a large part of that is, okay, what's your attitude towards money? What are the obstacles you're facing, and how do we address those? These days, we're extraordinarily busy in financial counselling. We've typically we're booked out 2 to 4 weeks in advance, but we also work with, we've got some colleagues that are known as financial wellbeing workers, and they do a fantastic job exactly in this area that you're talking about. They will delve deep into clients' understanding or their attitude towards money. What fears do they have about money? What fears do they have about earning a higher income or controlling their expenses or their debts? And they'll work with them actively in creating action plan that addresses all that sort of stuff. How do they correct those attitudes towards their money? How do they correct the actions that they've taken to date? Give them an understanding of the consequences of their actions to date as well. Talk to them about, well, if you continue on this path, how is that going to affect you into the future? And when you start having those sorts of discussions, because they've probably never thought about, okay, if I do this today, this is what it's going to do to me in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, 5 years' time. And our financial wellbeing coaches are fantastic at doing that sort of stuff. So they'll do much more of that coaching discussion than what a financial counsellor will typically do.
So the financial counsellor, it's a triage critical care type service. Let's stop the bleeding. Let's, get you stable. Then we can progress to some of the mindset things with the other team that you're speaking of.
Absolutely, because we don't want to see these situations recurring later on down the track. In that case, we're just chasing our tail. So it can be a big part of a financial counselling conversation, and whether that's done in-house with that same financial counsellor. Many financial counsellors are more than happy to take that on, but when we're busy and we've got those financial wellbeing coaches available to us and to our clients, we certainly take advantage of those as well.
Now, bringing it back to this year's Anti-Poverty Week, focusing on reducing stigma, we touched on it before the break. Like, what do you reckon is the most seen stigma about seeking help, speaking out? Do you think it is the shame thing or the awareness? Oh, no, awareness really isn't a stigma, is it?
No, it's more the shame thing. And look, and as far as a community stigma goes, I think it's something that we, as Australians, we've really adopted this mentality going back to the 70s. And if you're not working, there's something wrong with you. If you're collecting Centrelink benefits, there's something wrong with you. And honestly, there could be a multitude of reasons for it, and many of them are just quite simply beyond the person's control. I see clients on a weekly basis that say to me, I've just never been in this situation before. And a month ago, they were fine. And something has happened beyond their control, and all of a sudden they're in my office.
Yeah.
So, there's a big stigma around it. From a self-stigma, there's just financial stress. They're just quite simply, they're frozen, they're stuck, they're unsure what to do next, and they're just not, there's a lack of positive action because of that financial stress.
What percentage anecdotally, when people rock up to see you, is, because I like broad brushstrokes. The first one, life's happened because of nothing that I've done. It could be an injury, an illness, loss of job, systemic family, poverty, all that stuff. I'm born into this, where that's the problem, versus, no, you actually caused this problem because you spent too much, you knew you were racking up credit card debt, you need to come to terms with, you got to change you. Like, what percentage do you usually see?
I think it's good old 80-20 rule. I think 80% of it is something has occurred that clients just weren't expecting. Yep. But there is probably about 20% of them, they have taken steps in the past. They've overcommitted to credit they shouldn't have done. They're spending, they've got living expenses that are higher than their income, and they can, if they choose to do so, can take control of that. They just sometimes they're unsure what to do or how to address that. And sometimes it's just a case of saying, hey, look, if you do this, your life can be better in these different types of ways. And once you show them and once you paint that picture for them, then it makes it easier for them to take those steps, really.
In finishing, around this stigma thing for this year's theme, it can be akin, because I remember I wrote down in 2013, I went to my GP. I had some stuff going on. I was in bed basically for 5 days straight, really depressed, had some reactive depression going on. And I was so scared and nervous to go to my GP and say, I think something's wrong. And I've shared this story on the podcast, and I'll always share it. In my mind, going to the GP, and I said, I think I might be, I'm down, I'm this, I can't. I thought he was going to reach over to the drawer, get a big buzzer out, hit that buzzer. Hey, everyone, Glen's got depression. Woo, woo, woo. Hey, everyone, get in here. And we make it a big deal and how embarrassing and all this. And he's like, he's just on his keyboard. I was like, oh, sounds like you've got a bit of depression happening there. Let's just have a look here. And it was just a little, I thought this was like shameful to do that. I thought you were going to be like, I can't believe you got depression, Glen. So all that to say, I had the symptoms there, and it took me a while till I kind of knew what the problem was. If we go to financial hardship, are there some things that could be, what do they say, hiding in plain sight, other than I feel stressed because I'm living week on week, where someone could be in financial hardship and actually not know it? Took about a week to ask that question, but whatever.
Got there in the end.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you think that they've, because I also think it's like, well, year on year, financially speaking, you're going backwards. Is that well, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I'd have to agree with you. And I'm actually going to step away from that just from a moment, just to illustrate the point. I used to be, before I was a financial counsellor, I was a financial advisor. And one of the things that we regularly heard, not just me, but my whole financial counselling team, something we heard from our clients on a regular basis was, one of the best things you did for me was not the investment strategy the strategy that you did. It wasn't the superannuation strategy that you set up for me. It was the fact that you actually got me to sit down and do a budget. And until I did that, I had no idea how much money we were bleeding left, right, and centre. I've had some really, really high income earners as a former financial planner or advisor come say exactly that to me and just say, we had no idea. Now that we've done our budget, we know where we can start spending our money. And they're no different from many, many, many of my financial counselling clients. Until you actually sit down and put it on paper and they can see for themselves exactly where they're spending their money. And we've got a term that we regularly use in financial counselling, and that is spending leaks. There's money leaking out of your bank account, your wallet, your pockets, and it's going to something that you're spending on, you're just not keeping track of it. And once you actually put that down on paper and get that realization, not just the realization, but also the consequences of that spending or those spending leaks, it really, really changes their mindset and how they approach money going forward. So that's a big crux. And often with financial counseling clients, we'll spend the first 30, 45 minutes of a meeting sitting down and going through that with them, because that paints a really good picture for us as financial counsellor. It gives us really good insights to what sort of options are available to them, but it gives them really good insights into what steps they can start to identify for themselves, what sort of steps they can take. So your question is really valid. Yes, we see it on a regular basis.
What do you reckon, my last question, then I'll throw to you for closing comments. What do you reckon the biggest spending leak in someone's budget is? Because I've got an answer for this and I want to see if we're similar.
To tell you the truth, I've never really thought about this.
And there's no right or wrong answer, but my one's right.
Yeah, fair enough. I will say I've got a real big concern with phone plans.
Really?
Yeah. And I think the telcos have a little bit to answer for in this area, because I don't think they always take the best approach with setting up clients with their plans. And I can understand the reasons for doing that. But I see a lot of clients and they'll have $1,000 overdue on their electricity bill. They'll have $400 owing on their gas bill, but they'll still be religiously paying that $300 a month or $200 a month phone and internet plan, where they really could come up with a better solution. There's lots of phones out there that will do the jobs that we need. I take nothing away. It is an essential part of our existence these days to have phone and internet access. Take nothing away from that, especially if you're looking for work. It's absolutely crucial. So I understand that people need these services, but I think they can do better, and I think the telcos can do better as well in coming up with better financial solutions for their customers.
It's a good answer. Do you want to know mine?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm really looking forward to hear yours.
Well, I reckon the absolute biggest spending leak that gets people is interest on consumer debt, because the leak continues well after the thing has been consumed.
Yeah, take nothing away from that as well. Yeah, in fact, when we're looking at debt management, one of the biggest things we say is get rid of those high interest loans. Get rid of them first, because they're a hidden leak. People just don't realise, and until you actually sit down and look at their loan application and say, or their statement, say this is the interest you're paying on this amount of credit, particularly credit cards. I often do financial education workshops, and one of the things I talk to them about is the fact that if you just pay the minimum repayment on your credit card every month, I'll ask them how long they think it'll take off to pay off a credit card with a static balance, not adding to it at all. And they'll regularly come back and say, it'll probably take 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years at most. And they're often gobsmacked to find that it could be upwards of 35, 40 years to pay that off. So it's a really good point, Glenn.
Anyway, we are right against the clock. Paul Jordan from UnitingWA, any final comments that you want to say to our listeners on this episode for Anti-Poverty Week?
Big thing is be aware of financial counselling. If you pointed out right at the start of the segment that a lot of your listeners probably won't need financial counselling services, but there's very, very likely a friend or a family member that could really benefit from the service and just doesn't know that it's out there. So let them know that it's there. Let them know it's free. Let them know that it's a non-judgmental support. All they have to do is ask and make an appointment with us. They can do that quite easily just going through to the National Debt Helpline. They're at ndh.org.au, or they can contact their local their state financial counselling organisation to find a financial counsellor close to them. And just let them know that financial counsellors are very likely going to be able to guide them in ways that they just didn't know were possible. There's a lot of unknown support out there, and financial counsellors are really good at finding it.
Awesome. Paul Jordan, UnitingWA. We'll put a link in the details in the show notes to UnitingWA's website. Thank you so much for joining us this episode for Anti-Poverty Week.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me, Glenn.
Any advice is general financial advice only, which does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Because of that, you should consider if the advice is appropriate to you and your needs before acting on the information. If you do choose to buy a financial product, read the Product Disclosure Statement, PDS, and Target Market Determination, TMD, and obtain appropriate financial advice tailored to your needs. Simo Interactive Pty Ltd, the publisher of this podcast, and Glen James are authorised representatives of Money Sherpa Pty Ltd, which holds financial services license 451289. Opinions or comments from any guests on the podcast are theirs and not those of the host or the publisher or their respective license holders.